So, before we dive in today's episode, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a backstory for a few reasons. A, so you'll know why I am so passionate about our next guest and what she does. And also because maybe my story might help you. Maybe it's a relatable thing where you can listen to what happened with me and what led me to going meet with this person and how she helped me. So, Casie Trosclair is a functional medicine doctor here locally where I live in South Louisiana. And there was a time period where, for years, many, many years, I had gone to several doctors because I was experiencing things like hair loss and fatigue and mental fog and it's just several other things that I was just like I don't feel right. And I was like something's just not, I don't feel great. I don't feel little things that started happening that I was like, I'm not feeling like my old self. And so I started going to, whether it was general practitioners or I even went and seen an endocrinologist and my gynecologist and was like, something's not right. And all of them, and granted, all of this happened over a span of a few years. They would run all of these blood work tests and they would say, Pam, like your blood work is phenomenal. Like everything looks great. Like we don't know why you're feeling like this. I was put on antidepressants and medicine for anxiety. I was put on thyroid medicine at one point. I was told to change my birth control and all of these different things, and nothing helped at all. And I was still taking all of my normal vitamins and things like that. And so in 2019, at the very end of 2019, early 2020, I got off of birth control. And it was at that time that things really, and mind you, at that time, I was in my early 30s, like 31 ish, something like that. And that was when things gradually started to get worse and worse. There were things happening in my personal life as well. I was in a new relationship. My career got crazy busy where I was working very long hours and I, wasn't sleeping enough, but I was still working out and I was still eating right. And my nutrition was on point, or what I thought was anyway. And I was like, I'm healthy. I'm doing all of the right things, but I'm feeling worse and worse with every day. And it got to the point at the very beginning of last year. So at the very beginning of 2023. Let me take you back. So in 2022, I actually went see another doctor. And at that point, I was told that it was hormone related, some of the things that I had going on, and that my testosterone level was at zero. So I ended up getting a testosterone supplement, and that totally rocked my world in a really bad way. And I know that the testosterone supplements are fantastic for some women, and they do work for a lot of women because there are a lot of women that need them. But for me, that was not it. I went from a one level to another and then right back down to the point where it was a crash and burn. And so at the beginning of 2023, a friend of mine was like, Pam, why don't you go see a functional medicine doctor? And I'm like, what the heck is that? Like, I've gone to all these doctors and, they keep telling me. And the reason why I was at a point where I was like, it's really, really bad is because it was to the point where I felt like I wasn't even present every day. I felt like I was just going through the motions. And if anyone's experiencing this, you know what I'm talking about. I felt like my head was in the clouds. Like I'm here, but I'm not here. And I was, I don't even know what I was functioning on. The brain fog was so intense. The thoughts of, I felt like I was going crazy because my short term memory was, someone could tell me something and 2 minutes later, they could say, I just told you. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It was very scary. And then it got to the point where I was already having irregular periods, heavy periods, weeks, like a week or two of spotting before my period would even happen. And I, and then when it would, I was bleeding very, very heavy. for a day or two, and then it was just gone. My periods were very off. And then it got to the point right before I went to see Casie where I was passing clots. And I know this is TMI, but you are all women and I know that you understand, but it was a lot. And it was something I had never experienced before. And it got worse and worse over a period of a couple months to the point where the clots were very, very large and coming more frequent. And I was scared. So, y'all, I try to talk about this, and every time I do, like, I cry because it's like, it's so crazy how unhealthy I was and the things that I had going on. So, anyway, so I went see Casie, and y'all, when I tell you, I have never in my life, and you're going to hear this in the interview with her, I have never in my life had a doctor ask me questions the way that she did. My first appointment with her, she sat with me for 2 hours. 2 hours. You tell me when that you've ever gone to a doctor and they sat with you for 2 hours and she just asked questions. And some of the questions at first I was like, why is she even asking me this? Like, what does this have to do with anything that I'm coming to her for? But she wanted to know why, and she wanted to know where all of these problems stem from. What caused all of these things to happen? Not just, hey, what's going on? She wanted to dig deeper. And that alone meant so much to me because it was just for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a doctor who was listening to me. And I know if you've been to a doctor before, like I have or had at that point, that just kept saying, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, I'm telling you, there's something wrong with me. You can't tell me that this is normal for me to feel this way. And so for her to actually listen, like, oh gosh. And even by the end of that appointment, now granted, it was just my first appointment with her, so we hadn't even run any tests or anything like that, but she was able to give me some answers and to say, based on the information that you're telling me and the things that you're saying, I am 100% sure when I run these tests, this, and this is going to happen. And Pam, it's okay because we're going to fix it. Pam, you're going to be okay. Pam, you are correct in saying that no, this is not normal. You shouldn't feel this way, and I'm going to help you. Like when I tell you, God, I left her office and I sat in my car and cried because I was like, I have never in my life, A, had a doctor who listened to me, B, asked me the questions that she did, like she actually cared, and C, told me that it was fixable and that I didn't have to feel that way. So here I am crying again, y'all. I cannot talk about this without crying because if you know, you know. So anyway, she recommended a lot of blood work and a lot of tests and things like that. So I did all of that. And again, that second meeting that I had with her to go over the first round of blood work, because I actually met with her 3 times. That first round of blood work was just, I will tell you again, I sat with her again for another 2 hours. And another thing that she did during this appointment that completely blew me away was that she explained the test to me. Typically, when I've gone to any other doctor that I've gone to, if there's anything wrong, or I shouldn't even say that, the nurse calls and was like, oh, hey, we got your blood work back, everything looks good, or maybe if there's something wrong, they might say the doctor wants to see you, and then maybe I was prescribed thyroid medicine that I didn't even need, or whatever the case may be. So that was it. But no one ever sat me down, printed out the paperwork, and literally went through, she didn't skip over the things that were good. She literally sat there and said, this is what this level is, this is what it means, and this is great. This is what this level is, and this is what it means, and this is okay, but it could be better. And this is what this level is, and this is how this level talks to this other level over here. Y'all, like when I tell you, it wasn't just telling me what it was explaining to me like what caused what to happen. And this level is low, but it's probably because this level over here isn't right. So it was so much information that I left there feeling like a little bit overwhelmed, because it is a lot to take in and to understand. But at the same time, I left there with answers. I left there understanding why everything was happening. I left there knowing, just to see it and to understand it meant everything to me. And I also left there with a plan. of what things I was going to take, what supplements I was going to take, or the ways that I was going to change what I was eating, or the ways that I was going to change the way that I was working out to help me to feel better. And so I had one other appointment with her after that. And that is when you'll hear during the interview, she talks about a Dutch screening that tests hormones and other types of levels. And so I had that third appointment with her. And that's whenever I learned about, the hormone things that were going on. And she gave me another, list of do these things, went through all of those results with me. And when I tell y'all, within a matter of 3 months of sticking to everything she told me to take and everything she told me to do, I felt like a new person, like my old self, like a person that I felt like I had lost for so long. And so, y'all, that is what ultimately led to me being able to have the mental capacity and the strength to do more. That is what opened my mind up to really diving hard into journaling and spirituality, and ultimately what led to me being able to start MBS Fit Co. Because I can honestly tell you that had I not gone seen her, and if I would still be in that place of feeling the way that I was feeling and not even being able to remember things that happened within 10 minutes, or feeling like I wasn't even there, this would have never happened. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her and her advice and everything. So when I tell you that I am passionate about this woman, I am passionate about functional medicine in general. It'll be very hard for someone to ever convince me to go see a regular doctor ever again, because I am so passionate about functional medicine and that there is another way to be treated outside of just traditional prescription medicine. Listen to this episode. Ladies, this episode is for you. It is for every woman, because every woman at some point in her life, whether you're going through it now or you're getting there, or even if you haven't experienced any of this yet, please listen. So that way, when you do start experiencing these things, because as a woman, as you get older and your hormone changes and your body changes, you will start experiencing these things, that you will know that it is not normal. Do not be like me and spend years and years of letting it get to the point where it's so bad that it takes longer to fix it. So tune in, listen, learn, and if you're like me and are having those same feelings or anything, you are not alone. You are not alone, and you are not crazy. It is not normal for you to feel that way, and there is help to be had. So I hope you enjoy this episode today. Casie Trosclair is absolutely amazing, and I love her so much. So share it, listen to it, save it, and I hope you enjoy. Hey girl, welcome to Finding My Best Self, the podcast where it's totally okay to show up in your leggings and messy bun, because let's be real, that's our uniform here. The only rule is to be unapologetically yourself.
And I'm Mandy, and joining me is Pam, the queen of finding the silver linings. We're here to share laughs, tears, and everything in between. Think of us as your new best friends with some stories to tell and wisdom to share.
From face palms to victories, we're diving into the journey of self-discovery, wellness, and what it means to truly embrace who you are. So whether you're conquering the world or just trying to find your phone in the black hole, purse, we've got you covered.
Because here it's all about encouraging you to lace up those sneakers, or don't, we're not judging, and join us as we explore what it truly means to own your confidence and find your best self.
So pour yourself a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Finding My Best Self. I'm Pam Revet, your host, and I have today with me Casie Trosclair. She is a functional medicine provider who, if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard me talk about a functional medicine doctor. This is her. This is the one. She's changed my life. Last year when I went to her, I was experiencing lots of things that I didn't know what was going on, and I was just like, please help me. And so she did. And that is ultimately a big part of what led me to starting Finding My Best Self and MBS Fit Co. So I'm so excited to have her here today. She's going to share a lot about women's hormones and adrenals and cortisol and how all of that stuff works and talks to each other. Because I think it's something that happens with a lot of women as we age, and we don't really know what's going on or what to do or who to talk to. So, Casie, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your children, your family, what you do.
Sure, sure. So, as you said, Casie Trosclair. So, I am a board certified family nurse practitioner by trade. I am from the Bayou, so from Thibodeau, and I've graduated from Nichols, and then got my other degree as far as family nurse practitioner at University of South Alabama. And so, I married my high school sweetheart, Drake, and then we have two children. Nate and Vera. So Nate is 15 and Vera is going to be 10. And so, as far as what I do, as she said, I am a functional nurse practitioner. And so, I guess kind of give you a little bit of backstory as far as how I got there, because it didn't start out there, it started more traditional. And so, my background really extends from starting out in pediatrics to women's health. Eventually got into hospital medicine as well as internal medicine and then urgent care. And then kind of found myself at this crossroads and ended up crossing over into functional medicine after really having some personal issues with my son. So I mentioned he's 15. So he is pretty significant on the autism spectrum. And so I, like you guys, was kind of always in the traditional realm. I had access to all of the greatest docs. I felt like, I worked in a major hospital system, and, we followed that traditional pathway. And so Nate, really, when he was younger, it was a big struggle for us. We were having lots of behavioral issues, gut issues I didn't really recognize other than just like a constipation. But we ended up, going to neurology. We went to traditional docs. We were doing all the therapies, doing all the things, even to psychiatry. And so we just weren't getting the results that we wanted. So I knew I had to do something different. And so I started, like most of us, we might go online and start doing our own research. And so I came across like some parent forums and, started digging into more diet, found some literature that supported gluten-free, dairy-free in the autism population. And that was a big change for us. That basically, changed his gut
Mhm.
health as far as the constipation side, which secondarily helped his behavior. And so that was when my eyes were kind of open. There's something to this. And so I wanted to kind of start looking more into supplementation. And so I did that, but it was still so much, right? There was so much information out there, and it was like how to do it, what's safe, am I doing all the right things? And so it took years for me to kind of realize, I have to have some help here. And so it turned me to go and see an alternative practitioner who ended up being a functional provider. I didn't know what that was, but we went to see her. And in that 2 hour visit, basically, I had learned so much that I had really been searching for the last several years, from the chemistries of what was really going on in his body. And she utilized a lot of objective data through labs to kind of support and allow me to understand that. And then really just explain the body in general to me. And so it really opened my eyes to that. I always had a yearning to think that there had to be more, and really she explained to me that, like, yeah, this is the more. And I left that office with like a renewed spirit, and like, how do I do what you do? And she told me, you go back to functional medicine school, and that was it. And so, hook, line, and
Yeah.
sinker, I applied that fall and was in school by the spring. And my mission was to help my son ultimately, and then eventually to be able to help my community.
Yeah. So, Casie, I just like you had a past when I just went to regular doctors, right? The general practitioner doctors and things like that. And after years of experiencing all the things that I was experiencing, and then it got to a point where it was really bad. And that's when my friend was like, have you tried going to a functional medicine doctor? And I was like, what's functional medicine? Like,
Mhm.
what is like, what is the difference between going to see a functional medicine doctor and a regular doctor? So can you kind of elaborate on that, on just the exact difference between the two?
Sure. So in traditional medicine, we're really good at assessment and diagnosis and treatment, right? And so it's very much that's what we do. But we very seldomly actually look retrospectively as to like why this has happened. And so that's where functional medicine is a bit different. It's asking the question why. And so I use the analogy a lot of times in to my patients to say, so the home will get on fire, right? Like, so the house is fully engulfed. And basically that's where my patients are by the time they get to me. I mean, like everything's a mess. And so, but basically like, where were the smoke alarms? Why weren't we listening to our body maybe? Or, where were the early signs? And so we don't want to wait until there's a fulminant diagnosis. We need to be looking at, listening to our bodies, trying to figure out what's going on, putting these puzzle pieces together before there's a major issue. And so, functional medicine really takes a wide lens view at things. Once again, answers the question why, or at least that's our goal, but focuses on true preventative medicine. Once again, trying not to get to the diagnosis. And if we are there, then putting things into place to ask the question, why did this happen and how can we possibly reverse it? Because root cause is really key when it kind of comes down to reversing any type of illness.
Yeah. That was the biggest, I want to say eye opener, but it was the one thing that when I left your office, I was wow, really and truthfully, I told you, I literally left your office that first day, got in my car and sat down and cried. And not because out of anything bad, it was because A, I had answers, B, I finally knew that it wasn't just me and I wasn't crazy, and C, because of the amount of time that you spent with me and the questions that you asked. That was the most mind-blowing thing for me. And that is what I picked up the phone. I called and talked to so many people. I'm like, you will not believe the amount of questions that she asked me. And it was the questions at first when I was first sitting with you, you started asking me, I'm thinking to myself, like, why the heck are you asking me this? Like, these don't have any, what does it have to do with the fact that I'm telling you that I have all these problems? Like, why are you asking me about my childhood and when I got married and when I got divorced? And like, what does that have to do with anything? So it was so eye-opening for you to ask me all of those questions about what happened when, and really trying to get back to when it started or where it possibly started or what caused it to snowball. And that was just so like it was so eye-opening for me. And so that was in that moment that I was like, I have never ever in my life had a doctor sit with me and ask me questions to really understand what was going on and why, the why behind it. And I'm a very big person on anything like that in my life. Like everything in life, I'm always like, why did this happen? Why, in all things in life. So for someone to take the time to find out the why behind what caused all of my medical problems was huge for me. So in today, and I know that in functional medicine, you cover pretty much anything and everything, but for the specifics of this podcast, because I know that a lot of women listen, so we wanted to talk specific to just hormones and things that women deal with. Can you explain like what type of questions? So if you have a woman that comes to you and she's saying that I'm having all of these signs and symptoms of all of these things and I'm not too sure what's going on, what kind of questions, those why questions, do you ask to try and diagnose and find out what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So a timeline of events is so important. For one, the stage of life, so you have to take in, what stage of life obviously they're in, when, like you mentioned, when did these symptoms start? So whatever the issue is, that's so important because I a lot of times basically say like, there's the functional bucket and basically so much can kind of go in there before like the roof blows off, right? And so so many of my patients in the whole timeline issue, like we can kind of see where, you know, this diagnosis happened, but like my question's like, so what happened 1 to 2 years before that diagnosis? Because typically, like, that's
Mhm.
the straw that broke the camel's back. It was never a
Mhm.
fact that maybe things were not under the surface, kind of rumbling, having minor symptoms, maybe, but nothing that was consistent enough to make you really feel bad. But like that one trauma or that one major life event or that one major exposure may have been just enough to kind of push things over the edge. But so, like, that's a big thing as far as root cause, but also important things, especially when we're talking about hormones. So, sleep, like a lot of foundations, right? Like sleep, nutrition, detoxification. So, like,
Mhm.
we talk about poop, right? And so, like, that's something that,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm not used to talking about that, but it's so important for me because it tells me, like, are you
Yeah.
absorbing your nutrients,
Mhm.
or are you holding on to your poop for too long? And so basically that's like not taking out your garbage enough. And so things are going to get stinky and they're going to get toxic, and that's putting more stress on the liver. So you're not going to detoxify your hormones so much. So, it just tells me a lot. And that's very, very foundational when it kind of comes to kind of figuring out kind of root cause and the interconnectedness of the body. You kind of mentioned like trauma history and or
Mhm.
maybe sex life. Like our sex hormones tell us a lot about what's going on in our body. So whether it's like lack of libido for male or female, I mean, like that's super important. That's a natural part of our life. And so
Yeah.
if there is an issue there, whether it's a psychological or a physical issue, we need to figure out and get to the bottom of it because something went awry somewhere along the way, and we have to dig down and try to figure out like what happened so we can actually figure out how to reverse it.
Yeah. And that was what was so crazy to me is you explaining that, how
Yeah.
that all of that intertwines and there are things that cause these things to happen. So it helps you to be able to diagnose, and that was very, very eye-opening for me. Okay, so let's talk about the hormones cuz again, for me personally and then for a lot of women on here, I knew that there were hormones, that every woman has hormones and that there are different types of hormones, but then understanding where they're supposed to be. And the way that you put it to me was there is good, and then I think you can re-explain it because there's good and then there's optimal, or the different
Right.
where what's bad and what's okay and what's optimal.
Mhm.
And that's what's biggest. And then you also explained to me with the cortisol and adrenal levels and how everything kind of talks to each other, which I totally, and gut health too. How everything talks. So if one's off, then they're all off. And it's
Right.
like, I didn't know that. So
Yeah. So I guess, to kind of, I guess, elaborate a little bit on that, I kind of talked about obviously like the stages, right? So trying to figure out what stage of life, are you in? So obviously for, this podcast, most of our listeners are either going to be in their fertile stage, they may be in their perimenopausal stage, or maybe they'll be in their menopausal stage. And so like, having an understanding of where they are stage wise, that way we can know what is supposed to be optimal. And so when I'm doing like an intake, I can see certain patterns of whether it's PMS type symptoms, or maybe they're having infertility issues, or spotting. There's so many things that can kind of tell me kind of what's going
mhm,
on. Now obviously we can go and do testing to kind of get some accurate representation of kind of what's going on, but a history can tell you so much. It's not always just about testing, but really it's about like listening to your patients because they know their bodies the most. And so it's just, up to me or your functional practitioner to kind of weed through all of that and to really kind of figure out kind of what's going on. But like you kind of mentioned, it's not about just female hormones, or it's not about
yeah,
just gut health, but everything is interconnected, between thyroid and your gonads, which is your female hormones, to your adrenals and even into the brain, hippocampus. So like all of that is talking to each other. And so everything is what I explain is like a symphony. We cannot look at things in silos as far as like, okay, so I just have gut issues. And so my gut issues are not connected at all to my mental health issues. And my mental health issues are not at all connected to my cardiovascular issues, because We know, I mean, obviously, all of that is driving one versus the next. And so you really have to have that wide lens view to kind of understand, so this is interconnected. My body is listening to me, and it's just taking cues and clues from the environment and then reacting accordingly. And so, but anyway, hope that's helpful as far as an explanation.
Yeah, no, that was what was, like I said, the most eye-opening for me when it came to the hormone side of it, because I was expecting to go to you, or what I went to you for was because I know something's off with my hormones. At this point, with all of the symptoms that I had, I was like, I know this is my hormones.
Right.
And so I went to you and you were like, well, it's not just your hormones. It is, it sounds like at that time, because we hadn't run any tests yet, but even just based on what I was telling you, you were like, it sounds like, that your adrenals probably low and your cortisol and, you know, the the big word that you said about your brain that I can't pronounce.
That's okay.
All of these other levels. And then you talked about my gut health and explained how if one area is off, then it's like a snowball effect. Everything else goes wrong too, or could go wrong. Or even like you said, it's figuring out which one was the start, which
Right.
one started it all that caused everything else to get out of whack. And that was so eye-opening for me. It's like it's not just everything all of a sudden just goes kaput.
That's
It's
right.
like one thing kind of gets messed up and then there's the snowball that kind of happens after. So that was again just so eye-opening. So what when a woman starts having symptoms, so like what symptoms are you, because I know personally what symptoms I had, but I know every woman may have some different. And you mentioned some of them, like the spotting and all. But at what point would you recommend someone to say you need to come see either whether it's you, if they're local, or just maybe reach out to a functional medicine doctor in general? What symptoms?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of break things up into kind of the categories, the stages of life to see, like, what could be symptoms that there is an internal problem. And so I guess like one of the first stages we can talk about, like the fertile stage, right? So whether it's like kind of 18 to 40-ish, depending on kind of where you are. So obviously if there's fertility issues, right? If you're having mood
Mhm.
issues, if you're having PMS or PMDD, we kind of consider that as normal nowadays. It's not normal and it shouldn't be accepted as normal. There's I feel like it's getting more traction, but things such as like estrogen dominance is something that we're definitely seeing more and more nowadays. And so that can definitely look like heavy cycles or maybe irregular cycles, mood swings, fatigue, weight gain, breast tenderness, headaches, insomnia, decreased sex drive. Like, all of these
Mhm.
things could be because of an imbalance in hormones. And so, what may be starting out as a hormone issue, maybe because let's just say you've been under a lot of stress, and now we started taking headache medicine on a regular basis. And now we're starting to have weight issues. So now we've developed two more diagnoses. And so the headache
Mhm.
issues may eventually turn into NSAID use, which can lead to intestinal permeability, which can lead to food sensitivities. Like you can just see how that snowball effect can
Snowball.
quickly become an issue. And we've just talked about really one issue, right? And so
Yeah.
that may be some of the issues that, patients in their fertile years may be experiencing. And so I guess I'll kind of touch on like that whole estrogen dominant side, like why is that happening in our day and age? And so we have lots of exposures. And so one thing that I tell my patients, your skin is a big mouth. Okay, it may be a barrier, but it still absorbs. You stick a transdermal medication patch on your skin, you're going to get
Mm.
systemic levels. And so when you are lathering your lotion on you or putting your cosmetics on your face, you are absorbing a lot of times endocrine disruption or disruptors. And so that can,
Mm.
be endocrine mimickers. They can be estrogen mimickers. And so that can kind of swing you towards more of an estrogen dominant state. We get lots of hormones in our food. A chicken breast today does not look like a chicken breast 30 years ago, because they're putting antibiotics in there, they're putting hormones in there because, we have all these people to feed, and the bigger, the faster, the better, or so said, and so that's a big issue. We are probably the fattest we've ever been. And so excess adipose tissue or fat becomes an endocrine organ. And so that produces more
Mhm.
estrogen, stress. I mean, who's not stressed? Like all of these things could definitely be at
Yep.
play. And I mean, I'm just like brushing the surface,
The surface. Mhm.
on just some issues. And so, but you can see how these everyday things can definitely be altering, your hormones. And then once again, this is one phase of life. Now obviously a lot of these can be into play as far as like perimenopause. And so perimenopause is kind of, I think, where like I'm starting to get, so that can be anywhere from like 35 upwards of like maybe
Mhm.
50. And so that can look like some irregular cycles, maybe some longer cycles, maybe some shorter cycles. Sometimes we can start with hot flashes, mood swings, sleep disturbances is a big one. That was a big wake up call for me personally. I used to sleep like a champ. I'm not sleeping like a champ as much anymore. And so I'm taking my own interventions and doing some things to kind of help that. Vaginal dryness, decreased libido, fatigue, memory issues. That's such a big one for perimenopause. It's like brain fog,
Mhm.
memory issues. I've
Yep.
had women come in, they think that they're either going crazy or that they have early
Mm.
onset dementia. And so I'm like, okay, before we go there, right? Like, let's look at hormones, let's talk about it. And so just something as simple as, whether it's a herbal intervention, whether it's, doing bioidentical hormones can change your life, and so
Mhm.
there's no need to suffer. And so one of the latest courses I took recently, actually, the recommendation was if anyone between the age of like early 30s into 40s comes in with basically any mental health complaints, that progesterone should be the first line therapy rather than reaching for an SSRI. So like a Prozac or a Zoloft or
Mm.
things along those lines, because
Mhm.
it's not usually that we're lacking serotonin. It's usually that we're going through that change in life. And so if we focus on root cause, then fix the hormone issue rather than, just treating the symptoms, because you'll get so many more benefits, because it's never one single direction, And so anyway, and I'm not going to leave my menopause ladies out. And so menopause, obviously by definition, is one complete year without a cycle. And so typically, I think like the average age right now is about 51 for those women. And so you can go as early as like 45 or even younger, but definitely into the 50s. And so for you women that obviously, feel like you fell off the cliff, can no longer handle, like having mood issues, sensations of even overwhelm, obviously all the things we previously mentioned, the weight gain, all the things, once again, there's no need to suffer. The literature is very clear that bioidenticals are extremely safe, and we can help you. It's actually beneficial from, not just a mood and weight issues and those things, but like from a cardiovascular standpoint, from a brain health standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint, just, so many different things, even anti-cancer. And so lipids, cognitive, like I mean the benefits are
The
innumerable.
list goes on.
Say, yeah. And, but we have very much been in a culture where, for one, there was a big estrogen scare, many, many years ago with the Women's Health Initiative. And that really set women back in regards to actually being treated for whether it's bioidentical hormones or any kind of hormones in general.
Mhm.
That paper has been retracted. And so, but once it was out in the public, it created a lot of scare, because the literature basically said it increased cancer and it increased chance for heart attacks. And so no one wanted that.
Yeah.
So from a provider standpoint, from a patient perspective, we were really scared. And it's been, I think, over 25 years since that paper has been retracted, and we're still having to push education to
Yep.
this day. And so, it left a mark on many people's, thought processes in regards to hormone therapy. And so we can do better. And so, if you follow me at all, I always use the hashtag know better, do better. And so it's
Mhm.
just one of those things we have to continue to educate. And so that is such a huge passion of mine. And so so anyway, I hope that provides a little bit more insight on like the stages of life, symptoms you can have, and sometimes some whys.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the big thing is like I said when I went to you, just like you said, patients come to you and they're like, "I feel like I'm crazy." Like tell me I'm because that was really and truthfully like that is like I was like I'm coming to you because every other doctor has told me there's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
And every time somebody tells me there's nothing wrong, it gets worse. And at this point, I feel like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm making all of this up in my head. I'm like, at this point, everyone around me, like my husband and all these people are like, you're just making that up. Like, get over yourself. Stop saying you're tired. Stop saying you have brain fog. Stop saying like all these things. And I'm like, I'm telling you something's wrong. Like,
'Cause I'm
this can't be normal because it gets to the point where I'm just like, okay, everybody feels this way. Apparently, everybody thinks that I'm just supposed to feel like
your
this.
labs were
So,
normal, right?
yes, and all the doctors kept saying everything's normal, you're fine, or and I and yeah. And so then it got to the point where it was so bad that I was like, okay, I know this isn't normal, but I need someone who's going to help me. And that's what my thing was is I was like, I know something's wrong, just please help me. So it's for people to know that when they start having those symptoms, if I would have had you all those years ago, it wouldn't have gotten so bad.
Right.
So, and that's really what I wanted. The reason I wanted you to just kind of talk about the symptoms a little bit is for people to know when you start experiencing these things,
Right.
that's not normal and it is treatable and it's treatable with in most cases, I know that sometimes you do need actual prescription medicine, but in most cases, it is treatable with just supplements. And you can teach your body and help your body with just supplementation
Or
to
lifestyle,
eventually,
right?
right, or a
Yeah.
lifestyle, right, lifestyle or supplements. And then eventually, like you told me, eventually you should be able to get off of some of these supplements and your body just learns to start doing it by itself again. Because once it shuts off, it almost kind of forgets how, right? And so then you put the supplements back in to kind of replenish, and then your body's like, oh, yeah, I remember now, and then keeps doing it by itself. So, it's knowing that you don't have to go get a prescription medication. Like your body can heal itself
Yeah.
if you know what to take and how to do it.
Yeah.
And
And
that's so important.
from that standpoint, I'll kind of piggyback on, whether it's, nutritional deficiencies. We have been marketed that, I mean, we're very much in a convenience lifestyle. We live a high paced lifestyle. And so, you know, it's hard to drive through and get a healthy meal nowadays. And and a lot of times you find
Mhm.
yourself in that dynamic. And so year after year, time after time of having exposure to high calorie, low nutrient dense foods, that's going to leave
Mhm.
you with a lot of like malnutrition to some extent. And look, there's consequences of that. And so yeah, from a supplementation standpoint, by definition, supplementation means we're supplementing your nutrition. And so yeah, like you mentioned, our goal is maybe to dig you out the dirt when we do those labs and we see either whether it's clinical lows or it's what I call like suboptimal values. Let's dig out the dirt, get you to normal, and then teach you how to bring these nutrients in from a natural standpoint, from a food based supplementation. Because you don't want to always have to rely on supplements, but sometimes that really helps
Mhm.
us
Yeah.
once again to kind of dig out the dirt, make you feel better. And then, once we get to that optimal, then you can kind of roll over. But yeah,
Yeah.
nutrition's at the base of so much, whether it's sex hormones, whether it's thyroid hormones, whether it's anemias, I mean, you name it, the foundation of nutrition is just so important.
Yeah. So, Casey, and I don't remember exactly what level it was that we looked at, but so you're speaking whenever you said about nutrition and like again, right, like you said, we're fatter than what we've ever been, right? We put on weight, and especially living in South Louisiana. I mean, it's
Yeah.
what we have here. But for me, at the time that I went and see you, I had just come off of many, many years of a very, very strict diet,
Yeah.
probably too strict, really too strict. And so it was so funny for me the day that I went home, that first visit with after, or maybe it was once I got the second visit once I got my results back in. And you looked at me and you said, "You pick every piece of fat off your chicken, don't you?" And I was like, "I do. I will sit there and I will not eat, whether it's before I cook it or after. Like if I missed any, whenever I go to eat it." And you were like, "Eat the fat, Pam."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Do what? You want me to eat the fat on the chicken?" Like what? I've always been told, like, don't do that. And I was malnourishing myself to a point where it was too much.
Yeah.
Or on the opposite, like I wasn't getting enough of some of the nutrients that I thought was bad,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And so that's when you were like, it's okay to have some of the fat, leave some of the fat on the chicken, because my body was in dire need of something that I was taking out to a point where I was completely depleted.
Yeah. So believe it or not,
So,
from even a cholesterol standpoint, right? So like cholesterol is at the top of the sex hormone cascade. And so, if we're not getting enough fats, which, a large percentage of the brain is just, survives on fat. So that's really important. But then from like a sex hormone standpoint, if you are not getting enough from a cholesterol standpoint, you cannot produce sex hormones. And so it's a problem. And we grew up in that 90s stage where it was kind of low fat, low cal. It's
mhm.
we know better now, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
the end all be all. And I'll never tell anyone that there's like one way to do it, because it has to be bio individual. It has to be individualized. What's good for one may not be good for the next. And so that's where it
Mhm.
kind of comes into like really listening to your body and learning from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can see objective data just in a simple CMP. I can see that, whether you're not getting enough protein in, or in a traditional lipid panel, I can see if you're not eating enough fats. I mean, your triglycerides being too low is not a healthy thing. And
Mhm.
so anyway, yeah, I mean, there's nutrition's important, including the fat sometimes. Now, I'm not talking about margarine, okay? So not those
Yeah. Yeah.
saturated fats, but the fat on your steak, to sometimes the skin of your chicken,
Mhm.
cannot. It's not a bad thing for everyone. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Not and that's what I'm saying. Not that everybody needs it, but
that's
for
right.
me in my
Yeah.
circumstance, it was that I was restricting myself so much. I was on, another end of the spectrum where I was dieting too much, I guess.
And
Or
slowing your
I didn't think
metabolism
I was, but I
subsequently.
was.
Yeah, yeah, calorie restriction or even, malnutrition, it'll slow down your metabolism, you know, and so do the total opposite of what we're actually trying to accomplish. So most
Yeah.
patients, especially women, when they come to me, actually have to up their caloric intake. I'm not big on calories,
Mhm.
counting calories. We're looking at real food, right? And we're looking at protein
Mhm.
content and making sure you're hitting
Mhm.
those goals. And because protein, it typically boosts your metabolism. And women, we're not like huge meat eaters, or we're definitely looking at some. Um, Restriction to the amount of foods that we're eating. And so sometimes it can be counterproductive. And so, having an
Yeah.
educated, whether it's a functional provider, a dietitian, really kind of hone in on those things are kind of really important
Mhm.
for you.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by MBS Fit Co. Excitement is in the air at MBS Fit Co. as we prepare for our upcoming launch. We're introducing a line of premium activewear designed to seamlessly fit into both your workout routines and daily life. Our versatile collection is perfect for your workouts and equally suited for your day-to-day tasks, ensuring you look and feel your best, no matter the occasion. It's not just clothing. It's a commitment to self-care and embracing your best self. Be the first to experience the fusion of style, comfort, and functionality. Subscribe to our VIP list and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for insider information and exclusive perks available only on our launch day. Dive into the show notes for all the links you need. MBS Fit Co. is more than just activewear. It's a lifestyle. Join our community and be part of our exciting journey from day one to celebrate fitness, self-care, and your hero within. Don't just wear it, live it. All right, now let's dive back into this episode.
Okay, so let's switch gears just a little bit. So we talked about the hormone side. So what it says, so adrenals and cortisol, that was something that it wasn't foreign to me, right? I had heard those words before,
Mhm.
but I didn't really understand what they were and what they do. So can you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. So those terms are really kind of used interchangeably slightly. So it is the adrenal gland that produces the cortisol. And so that's a little stress gland that sits on each of your kidneys. And so it's necessary for survival. It's what, when you have that person cut out in front of you and you feel that surge of adrenaline come up, you become laser focused, your blood pressure's up, everything is, ready for fight or flight. It's imperative to have that present. So that is where, kind of cortisol comes in, but that's supposed to happen only about 20% of the time that we're in this fight or flight dynamic. But unfortunately, what I see in practice, and I think is really a major problem, is we're in this go, go, go lifestyle so much that our nervous system that is just sitting back and taking cues and clues from the environment really honestly thinks we're like running from the lion all the time, right? And so I
Mhm.
kind of explain to patients it would not be smart to be running from the lion because, right, we wake up, we're like blowing and going, we're sipping on caffeine all day. There's all these stressful deadlines, and you come home and you got to bring your kids to 3 different activities. And like, then we wonder why we can't sleep at night because our mind is like running, running, running. Sound familiar? We're
Mhm.
all kind of in this hamster wheel of things. And so, educating my patients to sometimes we can't take the stress away, but sometimes it's learning how to deal with the stress, whether that's through mindful breathing, whether that is from changing the type of exercise that you do. Because if you're running all day
Mhm.
and then plus your exercise is like high intensity interval training or going
Mhm.
for a stressful run, like that's not securing your survival when it comes down to a nervous system side. And so it just would not make sense for your body to be running from the lion and want to bring a baby into the world, right? Or running from the lion and allow you to lose that extra weight because when we're in a famine, because we're running from the lion, I mean, like you might need that, right? When's that extra meal going to come?
Mhm.
Like, so many dynamics. And I reference that thought a lot of times because it just makes sense. We have to understand that like human evolution, I mean, it's thousands of years. The body has been adapting and learning. And, now that we have computers and lights and all these things, and cars for that matter, like, we live a totally different life than we did, even 100 years ago. But like the human
Mhm.
body does not evolve that quickly. And so we have to kind of get back to the basics sometimes and just make sure like we're on point with stress as much as possible. We're on point with sleep, nutrition, detoxification, and movement. That's definitely foundational and makes such a difference in regards to circle back to those adrenals, okay? Because those adrenals are important on multiple dynamics for every stage of life, but especially in my perimenopausal to menopausal women, because when we do go through the change, the adrenals are about the only thing we have to kind of get us through to not really, as I say, fall off the cliff. And so, but yeah, in my patient sector, it's been a huge cause for, if you've ever heard of like adrenal fatigue, which is not definitely the science name, but adrenocorticoid insufficiency. There is a spectrum. And so we can have stages of that. And so as
Mhm.
you start to lose some of that, basically that flexibility, you can see signs like weight gain, immune deficiencies, chronic fatigue syndrome, increased pain, depression. So everything can
Mhm.
really slow down. Or sometimes I have patients at the beginning stages that they can't stop themselves. They are riding high all the time. And so that can be, sometimes just as dangerous or just as compromising to your health. And so, it's
Mhm.
really trying to recognize that that is a problem or is a thing. That way you can learn how to modify, whether it's those risk factors or dampening those symptoms that you may have, because once again, that is part of all of the interconnectedness of things. And so that's going to affect your sex hormones, that's going to affect your thyroid, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So if someone comes to you and once you've done your whole evaluation with them, talk to them and probably maybe did like some baseline blood work or whatever, what other specific to hormones, adrenal, cortisol, or, those things, what types of tests do you recommend if you've, feel, because I know that there's multiple, I know which one personally was recommended to me, but I know that there's multiple different tests that can be run to really further diagnose or help you to really decide this, like, or for me, it was seeing it on paper was so
Yeah.
huge for me to know, gosh, like whenever I actually saw it and for you to sit down and explain to me what those were was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, being heard, and that's what I hear you saying,
Hmm.
right? Like, I just like, I didn't realize it was a problem, or I felt like I was crazy, or whatever else. Like, being heard is so big, but also seeing the data that justifies what you're feeling is just so big. And so it's
Hmm.
such an important point to drive home. But yeah, so the best test, really you have two options to do hormones, as well as basically look at the adrenals. And so that would
Hmm.
be salivary hormone testing. And so that would be one test that you can actually do your female hormones as well as adrenal hormones,
Hmm.
so at home test. So, super convenient. The second test that I recommend is the Dutch test. It's a way more expansive test, but it gives you a lot of insight. It covers the adrenals, it covers all the sex hormones, actually, more sex hormones than just the salivary testing, but it also covers what we call like organic acids. So we can see things like neurotransmitters or byproducts of neurotransmitters. You can see like B12 sufficiency. Sometimes you can have an actual okay serum or blood work B12, but it's not an active form or readily available. And so we test that through a methylmalonic acid. So that's a functional marker. B6 can be seen there. So that's like one part of it. But something that's also super impressive for me with the Dutch test is the fact that we can see your detoxification pathways. So, like, I can see how you are detoxing your estrogen. So let's just say we have a patient that is estrogen dominant. Okay. They may be having endometriosis, really heavy cycles. They're having, breast cysts, breast pain, tenderness. A lot of times they'll shunt into a certain pathway that basically can tell me, I can help you by doing X, Y, and Z intervention to shunt you out of that pathway and into a healthier pathway. And so doing the testing, for one, if you're going to do hormones, it kind of allows me to kind of hone in. Like, I wouldn't want to put high dose hormones on a patient that, is
Hmm.
experiencing a lot of those symptoms. Now, we know that as prescribers, but it's definitely something that, kind of confirms that suspicion. We can also see there is a carcinogenic pathway. And so, if there is definitely maybe a family history of cancer, so that's something I really want to kind of hone in. And then there's a healthier pathway. And then the last thing, there's a methylation pathway. So you can actually see your detoxification capability if it's on a high or a low side. So obviously, if you're on a low side, I'm concerned about your ability to excrete toxins, your ability to excrete these hormones, because believe it or not, estrogen, as well as all your hormones, has to go through the liver for detoxification and has to go through the stool for detoxification. So if you are holding on to that stool too long, that can also be a driver for estrogen dominance
Hmm.
because it gets upcycled again and then that process has to repeat. And so, detox is so important. We just live in such a toxic world nowadays. And so that has to be on point.
Yeah. You have given like so much information today, and I hope that women would and I hate to say it like this, that I hope that someone, you know, gets answers or whatever, because I don't want anyone to have these feelings or feel, but they are normal, they are natural. So I just hope that anyone who is listening, who is experiencing any of this, maybe has had that revelation that I had and going to you that, oh my gosh, like this isn't normal.
Yeah.
And there is hope and there is help that can, that is out there that you can get. So, what's one piece of advice that you would give to listeners based on functional medicine, an overall piece of advice in functional medicine?
Okay. I think we need to sometimes slow down and actually start listening to our body. Your body
Mhm.
speaks to you in what we call signs and symptoms, right? And so sometimes it takes for the patient to come in and have to fill out my intake paperwork to actually sit down and reflect and be like, wow, like I didn't even realize this was such an issue. Like, it's an issue, but like it's
Yeah.
significant in my life. And so, it just kind of brings it to like, but why? And so, so for one, stop and start to listen to your body. It's trying to talk to you. If you feel
Mhm.
like something's not right, it's probably not right. And
Yeah.
and secondly, advocate for yourself. If you
Mhm.
learn and you feel like you're knowing better, ask questions. Don't be afraid, to ask questions or to seek alternative help in another dynamic, or whatever that might be. We have this inner spirit in us, that's intuition, that is going to guide us in the right direction. And so sometimes it's just yielding to it. I know it took me
Mhm.
years to get to that functional provider. I felt that yearning, but I was told by someone that I trusted at the time that, she was quack, so don't go there. And I mean,
Yeah.
things have changed. Time has evolved. Functional medicine has obviously shown itself to be, very successful. But I felt that I needed to do something different. I just didn't know what to do, and I didn't trust myself enough to kind of go out on a limb. And so, listen to your body. I think that's so huge, and advocate for yourself.
Yeah. That is so true. That is so, so true. Just listening in. So what's the number one thing you would like for listeners to take away from the interview today? Just something that you said.
So, yeah, so I use that hashtag already. I talked about it earlier, like know better, do better. After going to functional medicine school and, I look back at my previous practice, I was like, oh, my poor thyroid patients that had like the 10 hypothyroid symptoms. And I told them, but your TSH is normal. Like, cause that was, we were taught to go off of that. This is the standard of care. We know better now. It's not just about a TSH. There are multiple thyroid hormones that would need to be checked. And so, it's not your doctor's fault if they don't know that piece of information. I mean, it's just what's being taught. And the research has shown that it takes 25 years from something to be, found as true to actually get into practice, because, for one, it has to get into the medical literature, and then it has to be taught to the residents, and then they have to actually come out into practice, and then they actually have to put it into practice. So like, it just takes a long time for things to change. And so, we don't all have that time, for one. And we have so much access to information, so don't be afraid to listen to podcasts and to educate yourself, and once again, self advocate. I mean, that is, it is super important. And I think we all have to be advocates for our own health. When you see your doctor for 15 minutes, they can't touch everything, and they can't know everything, and they won't know your entire life story, but you are going to know yourself the best. And so you have to push and ask those questions, and once again, bring to light, look, this is what I'm seeing in literature, and this is what I think's going on. Like, are you willing to work with me in that dynamic? And if they are not, then you have to think about seeking care elsewhere, because we have to evolve. We have to know better. We have to do better. And look, the times are changing. I'm seeing traditional docs that are, getting more, even locally, getting more into alternative medicine, getting more into educating themselves on, bioidentical hormones or whatever it might be. So like, the tide is changing. It's just going to take a while. And so,
Takes time.
but until then, educate yourself.
Yeah. I like the advocating for yourself. One of my big things that I always say is that you are your longest commitment.
Oh, for
Out
sure.
of everything else in life, you should be your number one commitment, because you are your longest commitment. So taking care of ourselves in every aspect is so important.
Yeah.
So
And for you as a mom, or all those moms out there, when we get on the
yeah.
airplane and we are told to mask ourselves first before our kids, it's truth, even to health, right? And
Mhm.
so if you are not healthy, it is hard for you to take care of your children and be that mom that you want to be for them. And so,
Yep.
a lot of times I'll see, I'm going to, I'm bringing my child in first because they, have these issues or whatever kind of going on. I'll take care of myself afterwards. I get it. I do. But at the same time, you are going to set the example for your child. by putting
Mhm.
yourself a priority. You are going to, when we start to see one patient, it does not end with that patient. Those habits become family habits, and then it becomes
Mhm.
multi-generational education habits, and so
Mhm.
this is about changing community. This is not about just changing one person. And that is what I've seen, over the last, 16 months or so in business, is just, it has been amazing to see patients' lives change, but family dynamics change, because our children are, they're great, investments in our future. But I mean, we have to be there as well. We are their guides, we are their examples. And all you moms out there, they want you to be your best self, and so prioritize
Yeah.
yourself. You deserve
Yeah. I cannot scream self-care enough. And that is the entire purpose of MBS Fit Co. and this podcast, is that, like I went to scream self-care from the rooftops. It does not make you a bad mom.
That's
It
right.
does not make you a bad wife if you take care of you first. And if I could beat that into the head of every single person that I know, is
So
that
true.
because it took me so many years to finally not feel like I was being selfish for wanting to take care of me. And it does not make you a bad mom to
No,
take care of yourself first, or a bad wife, or a bad daughter, whatever. That is what you have to do in order to continue to do all of the things that you
all the
do, in
things.
order to be a good mom, in order to be a good wife, in order to be a good daughter, sister, friend. All of those things, you have to take care of you first, because if you're depleted, then that's all everybody else is getting, is a depleted you, and that's not a good you,
Couldn't have
right?
said it better myself.
So, just for fun, I like to always close out the podcast with asking you our motto question. So, what does finding my best self, the woman beyond the cape, mean to you?
Oh, wow. It's a loaded question. So, like you mentioned, self care has been something that I've had to learn myself. And I think prioritizing myself, even in my business, right? Like, if I'm going to preach it, I have to do it. And so I've had to pull back, even in my business, to make sure that my health is imperative. And in order for me to be an example to my family, be an example to my growing daughter, be the wife I need to be, I need to be that good person. And so, you know, my mental health, my spiritual health, my physical health, all those things, I think, have to be on point for me to be able to wear these multiple capes. And, I try to keep it real. And so, I'm very vulnerable to my patients. They know a lot about me. I'm very vulnerable even on social media, because, that's a highlight reel. I mean, let's just face it, right? And so it's not reality. And so, so I don't know, as far as if that answered the question or not, but like that has been really something that I've been focusing on. I would say, over the last 9 months or so, is, making sure I'm going to the gym, even if that means I have to cut out, seeing as many patients, or,
Yeah.
slowing down to make sure that I can actually have a lunch break and not be seeing patients and squeezing things in, because I
Mhm.
know it's just not healthy for me. It's not healthy for anyone,
Mhm.
And so we have to understand, if food will be thy medicine, right? Then, like, we have to give the body the time to consume it,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. So I'm screaming self care too for you.
Yeah. 100%. All the way.
Yeah.
Casie, thank you again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know without a doubt in my mind that this episode is going to reach and help so many women out there. Ladies, if you're listening, if this episode resonated with you in any way, save it, keep it. That way you have it to fall back on, and send it to anyone and everyone you know, whether you think that they are going through these things or you don't. Send it to every woman that you can, because I promise you, there are a lot of women that are going through things and they're just not talking about it, but out of fear, guilt, shame, and all of the things. So share it, because I know that there's a lot of people that need to hear it. If anyone wants to get in touch with Casie, I'll make sure to have all of her information in the show notes. If you would like to schedule an appointment with her, follow her on Facebook for her tips and tricks and things she may post out there. I know that, like I said, she has completely changed my life, and I know that she can help you too if you need it. So thanks again for coming today. I truly appreciate you personally in my life, and for sharing you this information on the interview as well.
Sure.
So,
Thank you. It's been an honor.
all right. Well, that about wraps us up for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you soon.
Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of Finding My Best Self. It's been real. It's been fun. We hope you found a piece of your story in ours and feel a little more inspired to chase after your best self.
And don't forget to share this episode with someone who needs a little boost today or a good laugh. And make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode.
Nothing says owning your confidence like a new outfit from MBS Fit Co. Check out the show notes for the link to shop our luxury athleisure. Go ahead, girl. Treat yourself.
And if you've got a story to share or a topic you're dying for us to cover, drop us a line. Our email is in the show notes. Just reach out and let's keep the conversation going.
So until next time, keep owning your confidence, embracing the chaos, and remember, the best version of you is just an episode away.
And again, we love you and we're endlessly rooting for you.